welcome everybody here. I'm Rob Atkinson. I'm president of the Information Technology Innovation Foundation. And we're going to have a presentation today about a report we're releasing today that's part of a broader series that ITIF has been engaged in, looking at international leadership in IT application areas. And the goal of our two-year project is to look at a number of different IT applications and see who's leading around the world in those areas, and most importantly, why are they leading? And we've released several studies, one on health IT, where we are woefully behind world leaders in the Scandinavian countries. Released another report on mobile payments, essentially being able to use your cell phone as a payment device, woefully behind the Koreans and the Japanese. We'll be releasing another report on e-government, another report on digital signatures, where we're finding the same pattern. So today, we're going to talk about a report on where we are on ITS and why we're behind. So, and a little bit about what we need to do. So I'll start by introducing our speakers. We'll have a short 2-minute video. We'll go through this, and we should have, we'll adjourn precisely at 10:30. We should have plenty of time for questions. So we'll start off with Stephen Ezell, who's a senior analyst at ITIF and the lead author of the report. That if you don't have one, there's a copy out there. Next, we'll go to Scott Belcher. Scott is the president and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. Prior to coming to ITS America, he has 20 years of public and private sector experience here in DC. Most recently served as Executive Vice President and General Counsel of the National Academy of Public Administration, and he holds a law degree and a Master of Public Policy. Next, we will go to Masahiro Nishikawa. And Mr. Nishikawa is a senior researcher in the ITS division in the National Institute of Land Infrastructure Management in Japan, which is part of their Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. And he has a BS in civil engineering and has spent really almost the last 25 years on ITS projects in Japan, and is clearly one of the leading experts in Japan on what Japan has done. We're pleased that he's here. He's, I think, spending 2 years here as a fellow in the U.S. over at Turner Fairbanks across the river. And last is Riz Kalik, who is the Global Business Executive for ITS and Growth Markets for IBM Global Government, where he focuses obviously on intelligent transportation systems. Prior to his role there on ITS, he led key wireless and mobile solutions business areas for IBM. And prior to joining IBM, he was with the Foreign Service in Denmark and South Africa. And he has degrees in international studies from George Mason and also at St. Peter's College in Oxford. I have to make the standard caveat that we're not endorsing IBM services or products here. Rather, Riz is an expert really on ITS and really what's going around in all the world, so I think he's one of the better people to be able to comment on what's happening. So with that, I'm going to show a short video. Again, it's an IBM video, but IBM is ubiquitous in ITS, so it's a pretty cool video. I think it gives you a little bit of a sense of what's going on.
Oh, what's the hold-up? Why aren't we moving?
Because all the cars are stopped.
Yes, I know that, Sarah, but why are they stopped?
Because everyone wants to get someplace at the same time. And when everyone's cars are on the road, then it gets jammed up.
Did you know these jams are costing us over $11 billion a year just to sit in traffic?
Do they make you pay to get jammed up?
No, that's just how much it costs the economy.
Well, the road should let the cars know. It's going to be full up.
What do you mean?
Well, if the traffic cameras talk to your Jeepers...
My Jeepers?
Your Jeepers, that thing.
Oh, my GPS.
Yes, your Jeepers. It can tell you if the road's going to be busy and show you another faster way of going. It could even tell you the best place to park when we get there. Instead of you getting angry, driving around and around looking for a place to park.
Okay, so how does the road know where I want to go?
Well, we come this way every day, so it would remember.
But by the time we're in the car and on our way, it's too late.
Well, then the road can send you a message on your phone instead, before we get in the car. It could tell you to leave earlier.
That's a good idea.
Yes, or it could tell you that if you've got lots of people in the car, like when we're with Mum and Sam, you can go on quick parts of the road.
Express lanes.
Yeah, or it could tell you to take the train or the bus on some days, because it'll be faster.
So what you mean is a totally integrated traffic system where public transport, the roads and parking spots all talk to one another and let us commuters know what's going on.
Yeah.
So what are you going to call this smart traffic system of yours?
Sarah Mitchell's always running traffic. Get it?
I get it. Very clever.
So that's a video from, I'm assuming, Australia.
That's right.
We don't want to insult any New Zealanders here. So look, I think what that video really was just trying to display is that there's this enormous potential now to transform our transportation system. You know, for so long we focused on transportation as something about asphalt and about steel, and the rest of the economy has been transformed through IT. And we've seen that in sector after sector, but in transportation we seem to be in the view that, well, it's not really about information, it's about cars with a lot of steel driving on things with concrete and asphalt. And I think that's about to change, and what we're seeing is countries are already making that change. You go to other countries where, for example, as we hear about in Japan, on certain highways, if you have the right equipment in your car, you're driving along a road and going around a curve on a freeway, and there's a backup, and you will get an audio signal in real time telling you better put on the brakes right now because there's a backup there and you can hit it. In Korea and Singapore, you have, and in Japan, you have real-time displays on your cell phone, on a computer, in your vehicle that tells you what the conditions of the roads are in real time. We have that a little bit, but if you ever do real time, I had to go to take my son up to up to BWI Airport recently. I said, well, I'll check and see what's better, the Parkway or 95. It said, the Parkway is great, 95 is a little crowded, so I go on the Parkway and it's a parking lot. I mean, it was totally meaningless information that was out of date, inaccurate. In other countries, it's not inaccurate and it's in real time. So I think we're on the cusp of a real revolution in this country, but only if we take the kinds of leadership and investment that we need to do. So with that, Stephen's going to walk us through most of the report.
Hi, I'm Stephen Ezel, lead author for this report. What I would like to do today is briefly explain what intelligent transportation systems are and what benefits they deliver, look at which countries lead the world in ITS, and try to explain what factors we believe have led to those countries' success. Then I will hand it off to Rob, who will look at what the barriers are to ITS in the United States, what the US can learn from global leaders, and offer a set of policy recommendations for policymakers who would like to spur and accelerate the deployment and adoption of ITS in our country. So our report on ITS looks primarily at the application of ITS in the surface transportation highway environment. We did not consider commercial, rail, maritime, or aviation ITS, and we looked primarily at ITS across 5 categories. Advanced traveler information systems. This is the provision of real-time traffic information, ideally inside the vehicle. Advanced transportation management systems, systems like adaptive traffic control lights, ramp meters that can improve the operational performance of highways. ITS-enabled pricing systems, using IT to finance transportation through congestion charging, electronic toll collection, vehicle miles travel systems. Advanced public transportation systems, next bus, next train technology, telling you when the next train is going to arrive in mass transit. And then finally, fully comprehensively integrated vehicle-to-infrastructure and vehicle-to-vehicle integration systems. You know, at a high level, what ITS does is bring intelligence to the transportation network. what it does is empower actors and elements within the transportation system, from drivers, from highway and transit network operators, even down to the actual devices like the traffic lights themselves, with real-time actionable information so that individuals can adapt their behavior and make better decisions based upon this real-time information, whether it's when to travel, whether to shift your mode from driving to rail, whether it's where to build new roadways. ITS bring information to this transportation system that enables all actors to make better decisions. So our report identified 5 key benefits that ITS confer. First, the profound potential to increase both driver and pedestrian safety. The United States vision of a vehicle-to-infrastructure integration system is called IntelliDrive, and it is believed that if IntelliDrive were fully deployed, it could address up to 82% of the crash scenarios involving unimpaired drivers. In Japan, ITS is a critical part of the country's vision to reduce traffic fatalities below 5,000 and to eliminate all traffic fatalities in the country by 2025. ITS also improved the operational performance of the transportation network. For example, if the United States were to move to computerized adaptive traffic signal lights, this is a situation where you're stuck at a traffic light, nobody else is around you, but the light's not changing from red to green because the system's not intelligent enough to know that you're there and you're waiting to pass through when there's nobody else there. If the US moved to such a system, we would be able to reduce stops by 40%, reduce travel time by 25%, reduce fuel consumption by 10%, and annual savings of 400 million gallons of fuel, and reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 22%, or 3.5 million tons annually in the United States. If we were to deploy other systems such as congestion pricing, we would be able to decrease peak travel time, peak travel volume of between 8 and 20% in the United States. Ultimately, by improving the operational performance of our transportation network, we can target transportation investments in ways that they will deliver the most benefit, and we will be able to move towards a performance-based transportation financing system in the United States. And of course, ITS also enhance personal mobility and convenience, both by bringing that real-time information about the conditions of the roadways. In Japan, this manifests itself via an onboard unit that combines real-time traffic information with GPS knowledge, so it can dynamically, in the vehicle, plot optimal route navigation for you. This can go a long way towards reducing congestion, which in the United States has an economic cost of $200 billion a year and results in 4.2 billion lost hours for drivers. That's a full work week lost for drivers per week in the United States, and costs 2.8 billion gallons of fuel. It also delivers environmental benefits, as I said. It's a key part of Japan's move towards Kyoto. Implementation of electronic toll collection alone in Japan is saving 2.5 million tons towards their Kyoto targets. And finally, ITS are instrumental for boosting productivity and expanding economic and employment growth, and can help mitigate the $200 billion a year annual economic impact of congestion, and also the $230 billion a year impact of traffic accidents and concomitant injuries and fatalities.
I see folks in the back. If you want to just come on up, there's lots of seats up here. Feel free to do that.
Overall, ITS investments deliver superior benefit cost returns compared to conventional investments in highway capacity. Our study found that ITS on average generate about a 9 to 1 benefit cost return compared to the 2.7 benefit cost return of traditional highway investments. Investments in traffic signal lights alone deliver a 38 to 1 cost benefit ratio. The GAO has estimated that if we were to implement a nationwide real-time traffic information system, the present cost of that would be $1.2 billion, but it would deliver $30.2 billion in benefits a 25-to-1 cost-benefit ratio. So we looked at which countries in the world were leaders in ITS, and the world leaders appear to be Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. I think Japan really stands at the head of the pack. Their VIX, Vehicle Information Communication System, was launched in 1996, went nationwide as of 2003, has 24 million VIX units installed in vehicles, overall 35 million car navigation units in Japan. But as I said earlier, what VIX does is, through an onboard telematics unit, combines real-time traffic information with where you are on the roadway and allows you, the system plots optimal route guidance in the car. It reduces travel times in Japan by about 20%. Japan is now moving to implement SmartWay, which might be called version 2.0 of VIX, which will go to the next level of providing audio and video presentation through the onboard display in the car. Amazingly, with their SmartWay system, Japan, and SmartWay, I should say, is a national cooperative vehicle highway integration infrastructure that went from conceptualization in 2004 to initial deployment in 2007 to nationwide deployment in 2009. So in 5 years, Japan went from conceptualization to implementation of a national vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure integration. I think it's very impressive. Elsewhere, 68% of cars in Japan use electronic toll collection. There's a single national standard for electronic toll collection in Japan, so you don't have to have different passes for different jurisdictions. The country is implementing a nationwide bus location system. The country invests $700 million a year in ITS. That's twice the level of the United States. Mr. Nishikawa will get more into the technical details of SmartWay and what the system's capable of, but Japan, we thought, clearly stands out as a world leader in deploying ITS. South Korea, also a world leader. The South Korean ITS master plan put forward in 2000 was a 20-year ITS master plan that invested $6.3 billion in ITS. Updated as of 2008, the country between 08 and 20 will invest $230 million a year in ITS. The country has 9,300 buses and 300 bus stops equipped with real-time information about the status of assets in the transportation in the public transit system, so real-time status alerts for buses and trains. Extensive use of smart cards and cell phones. So in South Korea, there are 30 million contactless transactions made in mass transit each day using smart cards and mobile phones. 31% of vehicles have onboard navigation systems. There is a single nationwide ETC system, electronic toll collection system. And it covers 50% of highways currently, which will go to 70% by 2013 and be nationwide thereafter. Another thing South Korea does, I thought is very impressive, is it keeps statistics on the national economic benefits of its ITS deployments. So, for example, it is able to document that the benefits of its high-pass electronic toll collection system since launch in terms of reduced transportation time, operating expense, and environmental pollution impact have been $1.3 billion since launch. So at a national level, it is making assessments of the economic impact of its ITS investments. Singapore was the first country in the world to implement electronic road pricing or congestion charging in 1998. The country has actually had some form of congestion pricing in place since 1975, just wasn't electronic before. Singapore has countrywide implementation of the adaptive computerized traffic signals that I spoke about earlier. The country does real-time traffic collection traffic data collection and dissemination through a fleet of 5,000 probe vehicles operating throughout the country. In 2008, they implemented real-time bus status panels at all the bus stops in the country. They've had a national parking guidance system in place since 2008, and the Land Transport Authority's iTransport system is a leader in the world in terms of using historical and real-time traffic data to do modeling of what anticipated future traffic flows are going to be on a real-time basis. So they're deploying technology to assess what the conditions of the roadway will be. Altogether, looking at Singapore's deployments of ITS holistically, we believe they're one of the leaders in the world. So, what factors explain country leadership in intelligent transportation systems? We broke the factors into two categories: non-policy factors and policy factors. With regard to non-policy factors, we looked at geography, population density, cultural factors, and that's all enumerated in the report. We found that non-policy factors had a modest effect on explaining countries' leadership in ITS. Certainly Japan, Singapore, very population dense, very geographically constrained societies, and that contributed to their embrace of ITS to maximize the operational performance of their roadways. But we face the same conditions in the US in many areas with constrained geographies, dense populations, and we haven't embraced ITS to that extent. Rather, we found that policy factors were the key explanatory variable in explaining countries' leadership in ITS. And in particular, we found three. First, countries that lead the world in ITS demonstrate national level commitment and vision. Second, they make substantial investments in intelligent transportation systems. And third, they feature strong government leadership in convening relevant stakeholders and spearheading implementation of ITS. You can look at Japan. Its 2005 new IT reform strategy put forward guidelines for the informatization of the road and set a national vision, as I said, to eliminate traffic fatalities by 2025. In Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, the country's ITF master plans are tied into their national IT policies. And so the synergies between those are well understood. South Korea has a high-speed optical telecommunications backbone supporting its ITS applications. So at the highest levels of government, they are putting forward the strategy to implement intelligent transportation systems. Finally, I would also say, with regard to investment, both Japan and South Korea are investing twice as much in ITS as a share of their GDP than the United States is. Finally, I would say they recognize ITS as a force multiplier for the transportation network that helps these countries move to a performance-based transportation financing system, and that they built their IT infrastructure, their ITS infrastructure as a platform that would allow for the private sector to build new value-added products and services atop that platform. Rob?
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So I think the real question for the U.S. is, so this is great stuff. It's cool. It's going to do all these great things. Pretty clear cost-benefit, benefit-cost ratios. Why aren't we doing it? And when you talk to people in Washington about it, you sort of get one of three stories, usually a combination of those three. The first one is, well, look, we got too many other problems. We can't afford to do this. And secondly, the technology's not really ready. So, we'll just keep doing what we've been doing for the last 75 years and hope that works. Clearly the technology's ready. We see that in Japan, we see that in Korea, we see that in Singapore. This is not a technology that needs a lot more development. Certainly there's parts of it that does, but there's certainly technology now that could be deployed. Secondly, as we've seen, these are dramatic benefits. I mean, these benefits way outweigh benefits of doing the traditional concrete and asphalt. It's not to say that every single project gets those benefits, but system-wide, you get those benefits. The second big, I would argue, excuse we have in the US is, well, the states will do it. Well, look, the states aren't doing it, and there's a reason the states aren't doing it, and there's 2 or 3 big reasons the states aren't doing it. One, states tend to do what states do, which is invest in pavement and concrete. Secondly, the states don't have money. Their budgets are so strapped that they can't think about doing something new. And third, they oftentimes don't have the expertise or the capabilities. And finally, what much of this technology is essentially a national system. We saw that citation of the GAO Traveler Information System. So if you have a statewide traveler information system, it doesn't do a lot. If you're in the state, it might help you, but it doesn't create a critical mass so that you, as a car maker, are going to want to put that technology in your car and figure out how people can use it. So we have some real, I would argue, serious barriers. So what do we need to do? I think what first thing we need to do is we need to just basically get over this almost ideological, religious view we have that the federal government can't play an implementation role and it has to be done by the states. Having worked for a governor, I'm quite sympathetic to states. I also chaired the National Commission on Highway Surface Transportation Infrastructure Financing, so we're very sympathetic and understand where the states are. But if we're going to do this, we can't simply say, hey, states, you go do it. The feds will do a little bit of R&D. If you look at, it was sort of somewhat akin to John Kennedy saying, we have a goal to put a man to the moon by the end of this decade, and I'm going to fund all the states to see if they can build a rocket. And clearly, that was not what we did. We created NASA, and we built an amazing system to get us to the moon and back. We're talking about a similar system today, and it really is only the federal government that can do that. Now, by that, I just want to make clear, I'm not saying there's no role for the states. Clearly, states are going to play a key role, but we have to have the federal government step up. Akin again to what we did with the interstate highway system. Eisenhower didn't say, hey, I think we need an interstate highway system. Would you states go out and figure that out and maybe do your own design standards? One design standard, one plan, lots of money. Secondly, lots of money. We simply can't do this on the cheap. If you look at what other countries are doing, as Stephen alluded to, did we get that slide? No, we didn't. All right. There is a slide in the report that shows. Oh, it's in there. All right, it's in the wrong. It's okay. So we would argue that we need to increase funding by anywhere between $2.5 and $3 billion a year. Now that sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about a reauthorization where you're in the $40, $50 billion a year, it's not really very much money. And again, it's not a question of adding new money to this. I would argue if we're getting cost-benefit ratios of ITS that are much better than the conventional physical infrastructure we're building, we ought to be moving more of that over from bricks and mortar and concrete and steel over into ITS. Third, the Joint Program Office in RITA, who is in charge of ITS, its mandate is very, very constricted. It can do R&D, but even there, frankly, it doesn't do the kind of big-scale systemic R&D projects we need, and it needs to be able to fund deployment as well. Another one, which is sort of sounds, what's the relationship to ITS with that? There's a big push in reauthorization this year, and I hope it really succeeds. Really, for the first time, there's a push to tie federal funding through the Highway Trust Fund to real performance. Right now, we don't have that. You, as a state, you can be a total failure, and you can get the same amount of money as a state that's a total success. All you need to do is just deal with the upfront performance, i.e. did you fill out the right forms and you do all the things and hire the right contractors and that sort of thing. We need to move the system to more of a performance-based system. Doing that will enable ITS to have a much better, more level playing field. We'll be able to compete more effectively within state DOTs for dollars and attention, because ITS is going to let states meet their performance goals so much better than the other kinds of investment. Related to that, by the way, ITS is a big enabler of being able to move to a system performance kind of system because it lets you measure performance, again, almost in real time. That's the funding thing you can see. This is how much South Korea and Japan invest as a share of GDP. You know, just on that slide alone, it's not a big surprise that we're behind. Another one would be to simply for Congress in the reauthorization to mandate that DOT work with states to require real-time traffic information systems to be deployed by 2014. And if you haven't deployed them, you're going to start getting dinged on your highway trust fund allocations. Now, let's hold states accountable for building this in collaboration with each other and in collaboration with DOT. Lastly, one of the secrets, I think, of why Korea, Japan, and South Korea have been successful is they look at the role of government as building this basic infrastructure where, in the case of traveler information system, this information is put out there. The private sector can use it and build value-added services on top of that. In the U.S., as we talk about in the report, we went down a very, I think, dead-end path where we have one vendor who has a monopoly in certain metropolitan areas, has the data, sells the data. The data is very limited in getting. We should think about this akin to the National Weather Service, where they collect the data and what data goes out there for all sorts of value-added providers. And I think if we have that be the overall goal, we can make a lot of progress. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who will comment on what we've done. Thank you.
Well, good morning. First of all, I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to commend Rob and Stephen and the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation on what I think is a very good and comprehensive report that sets a very good stage for the dialogue that we're going to go forward with over the coming years. I'm the president of ITS America. ITS America is a public-private partnership with members from state and local departments of transportation, transit organizations, universities, and private sector companies that range from the OEMs to toll companies to ITC companies and traffic. Everybody who's involved in using smart transportation systems to solve state and local transportation problems. Now, the report talks about the United States lagging behind, and I think that's very accurate. But I do want to make a point that, and this is in the report, that there's a lot of ITS out there in the United States. We're deploying real-time traffic information systems across the country. States are deploying 511 systems. You've got a number of vehicles with safety equipment in it. You've got pre-pass, which is drive-by-way stations. You've got traffic light synchronization. You've got ramp metering. You've got the whole. We have a whole panoply of ITS programs in the United States. But I think what the report makes clear, and makes clear very importantly, is what we don't have is systemic deployment. We have anecdotal deployment, and then we have deployment that's dependent upon changes in funding levels. So in many metropolitan areas, we have traffic lights that are capable of being synchronized. They have the technology, but they're not, and they once were synchronized, but they're no longer synchronized because the funding's not there. So we haven't made it a priority on a national level. We've been engaged at this for two decades. So before I get into what I'm going to talk about, if you're interested in seeing the technologies that I'm talking about in real time, come to the ITS America annual meeting in May in Houston. Come to Busan, South Korea in October for the ITS World Congress. You'll see these technologies that are being deployed and that are available. And in Busan, they will be showing what they call a ubiquitous society, where they will be integrating all of their technologies throughout Busan specifically for this. So why is this study important? First of all, it shows that the United States is falling behind. Japan, Singapore, South Korea, China, Europe, Asia have all passed us by. And they're making investments that far outstrip the investment in the United States. And if we don't start to make those investments and we don't start to look to address the transportation problems we have in this country, we will quickly fall further and further and further behind. The commission that Rob chaired showed that the United States needs to make an investment on the order of an additional, is it $200 billion a year for the next 20 years? Is that your number?
Total. We need to spend another 130 billion.
Okay. It depends on what report you read, but big numbers just to get up to par, just to return. So technology can help you do that. The report focuses largely on congestion with a little bit of attention to fatalities. But I think it's important to really look at the importance of safety and the importance of emissions and how technology can help you address those issues as well. These problems in the United States, congestion, safety, emissions, are only going to get worse over the coming decades as our population ages, as our population grows, and we become more urbanized. So the situation we're facing right now is only going to get worse. And as Rob said, and as Stephen said, we can't build our way out. We've got to use technology to get ourselves out of this. And there are very, very achievable policy steps that can be used. And the report's on target when it says that ITS can help. ITS needs to be the equivalent of the interstate highway system, or of our investment in the internet, or of our investment in space. Okay. So, as I said, 100 people will die today in traffic accidents. And we have the technology that can help to solve that. Technologies like lane departure warnings, blind spot detection, and collision avoidance systems can reduce deaths by 31%. That's nearly 12,000 funerals. Things like open road tolling. Open road tolling, for example, can reduce traffic accidents at tolling areas by 60% over traditional tolling systems. And IntelliDrive, US DOT's program to do vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure, has the capacity to reduce traffic fatalities by 82%. We commend the US DOT for their leadership in this area and for their strategic plan. I think that's starting to get to the place that we need to be, where we're setting forward plans and methodology to achieve those, and my hat's off to DOT for that. As I said, systems that we've got throughout the United States, there are systems that have been working. If you look at, for example, PrePass. PrePass is a drive-by weigh station deployed in 27 states that allows you to check weight, safety, and credentialing of commercial vehicles. That has reduced delays by over 4.6 million hours. It's saved 111 metric tons of emissions, 11 million gallons of fuel, and saved truckers $486 million a year. That's just one example of one deployment, and it's not even a nationwide deployment. If you look at traffic light synchronization, 511 systems throughout that have been installed, 511 systems are installed in 37 states, covering 66% of the population. That's important. There are other programs, but again, these are being deployed on a state-by-state, a city-by-city basis, not on a national basis. We talked about how the report discusses how ITS can really leverage your dollar. And as we face the financially constrained environment that we're going into, every dollar counts. We're not going to be able to build our way. States are going to have limited budgets, and we're going to have this. We're going to battle over where our funding comes from. And I'm not going to go back over the savings, but Stephen mentioned them, and you can read about them in the report. ITS technology also is a force multiplier. It creates the kind of jobs that the president is talking about and that we should all be very interested in. US DOT estimates that 50% of the dollars spent on ITS projects go to salaries and wages. And so if you look at the network effect, we're talking about creating green jobs, high-tech jobs, automotive jobs, information technology jobs, consumer electronics jobs. These are the kinds of jobs this country needs to continue to propel us into the future. So what do we do to make sure that we get there and that we correct this? ITS America is promoting three primary factors in its authorization proposal, which is very consistent with the report that's been produced by ITIF. First of all, we think that you need to incentivize performance improvement. Real-time system and performance data enables the states to measure their performance, and then the federal government to help work with them to achieve that performance. It enables states to actively manage their multimodal transportation systems and to get the most out of their system. We need to have a performance-based system. We need to provide dedicated funding to deploying ITS solutions. The next authorization bill should reestablish the ITS deployment program and provide at least $1 billion a year to deploy and integrate these time-saving, life-saving, and money-saving solutions. But this investment should be part of a larger investment in system operations and maintenance, which we believe would require $3 billion a year. In the 2005 authorization bill, the U.S. House had a specific ITS deployment funding program in it, and it was stripped out in Congress. As a result of that, we're 5 years further behind in our national deployment of ITS systems, which is really, I think, a real tragedy. And then finally, ITS America supports a Smart Cities and Communities initiative where we work, the federal government works with states and the private sector to deploy systems at scale in a number of cities or corridors around the country. Part of the problem we face, again, with these small anecdotal deployments is we're not deploying at scale. We have new lessons to learn that we're not going to learn in test labs that are a couple of blocks or maybe even a couple of miles. We need to do this stuff on scale. If we're going to figure out IntelliDrive, if we're going to figure out BMT, if we're going to figure out all of these national programs that we're talking about that are absolutely necessary for us to move forward, we've got to do this at scale. So we support a Smart Cities and Communities program. So I think that this program provides a framework for the transportation community to make a strong case to Congress, the administration, and the American people. One of the things that I hearken on in every speech that I give is that we've got to also take the dialogue outside of this room. We've got to take the dialogue to the people, because until your significant others, your kids start demanding better, it will be very difficult to get Congress to change. And I think we've got to get Congress to change. ITS America is starting to lead a movement towards that goal. That movement is involved with the world's largest businesses, environment and smart growth advocates, public safety organizations, highway, transit, automotive associations. And we're working to push this agenda, and we welcome each of you to join that. This report by ITIF should be a wake-up call to the nation's leaders. We've had a number of wake-up calls, and hopefully this one will again take us a little bit further. But if we don't make the kind of investments, if we don't take the kind of approach that's outlined in this report, we will fall further and further behind. Again, I invite you all to come to Houston in May. We will be deploying some very interesting technology there. We'll have some of the nation's leaders talking about what can happen and what is happening throughout the country. And we see that as an opportunity to really spur the deployment of ITS technology throughout the country. And so look forward to seeing you, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Mr. Ishikawa, explain what's going on if you can.
Good morning. I'm Masahiro Nishikawa. I really appreciate giving me opportunity to make a presentation. And before my presentation, I read this report. Before my presentation, I would like to mention this report. And this report is useful for us to understand what is missing and what needs to be improved. I would like to let my co-workers in Japan know about this report so that they also utilize the information for our future activities. Thank you very much. Now, first, I would like to give you an overview in Japanese ETC. As you know, the number of ETC onboard units is rapidly growing. Just now, about 26 million ETC onboard units are in the market. And the right figure shows the ETC utilization rate 80% of drivers use ETC on Japanese toll road. Next, the car navigation service. In Japan, in 1989, and the standard national digital roadmap deployment was completed, and distribution was started in 2009. More than 35 million car navigation units are shipped. Next, BICS, Vehicle Information and Communication System, has been widely utilized. As you know, BICS is a unified nationwide system and provide real-time road traffic information to car navigation system. In order to use a BICS, a vehicle must be equipped with a BICS unit. In 2009, about 24 million BICS units has been shipped. Next, public-private partnership is a special focus to promote smart way in Japan. In 2005, MLIT started collaborative research with 23 private companies. And in 2007, they published the standard specs for onboard units and roads. And demonstration on public roads started from 2007, and a large-scale demonstration was held in 2008. The smart way and deployment at the national level started since this autumn 2009. The system for realization of smart way service is a road vehicle communication system using DSRC roadside units and ITS onboard units with 5.8 GHz band of radio waves. Two types of ITS onboard unit has been developed jointly by public and private sector. One type is linked to a car navigation system and use both visual image and audio to supply the information received. The other type is a speech-only unit that supplies the information received in audio form only. Japan's cooperative vehicle highway system is characterized by the facts that they are based on DSRC only.
I should have added, by the way, we will put the slides up on our website later today or tomorrow.
So,
It's already up.
The slides are already up. Okay, there we go.
real time.
Real time.
In the past, individual service has been provided with separate onboard units for car navigation system, BICS, ETC, private sector service, and so on. But efforts are now underway in Japan to integrate diverse service in single ITS onboard unit. This is known as smart way service. Since 2009, three services are nationally deployed. First is providing wide area traffic information. Second is providing audio traffic information. Third is providing focus area traffic information that the driver might encounter as they drive to their destination to maintain safe driving. In addition to the service demonstration to access information at the parking lot and rest areas has been launched. The future option includes fee collection system to pay parking fee and collecting vehicle position information to provide driving time and setting efficient routes for logistics above. Those ideas are in consideration for for nationwide deployment. Next, I would like to explain the policy perspective aimed at promoting the deployment and widespread use of smartware service. The first of these policy perspectives is the development of a simplified onboard unit. As I noted at the beginning of my presentation, two types of onboard unit have been developed for the realization of smartware service. Speech-only ITIF onboard unit, even cars that are not equipped with the car navigation system, can obtain safety information in audio form. There is a high level of need of simple speech-only ITIF onboard units among drivers who are familiar with rules such as truckers. Since October 2009, ITIF onboard units by private companies are in the market. Those units are compatible with the service barrier service. The projection shows that about 10 million ITIF onboard units will be in the market in the next 5 years. We are installing roadside equipment primarily on expressway and taking the lead by introducing public service, such as providing wide area traffic information. Anticipated benefit of a nationwide deployment is to reduce congestion and promote low carbon innovation through the sophisticated provision of information, including appropriate route guidance. In addition, nationwide deployment will provide economic benefit, including the sale of ITIF onboard unit and will effect in content-related market. This slide shows a major future plan. In 2009, 1,000 roadside equipment started to install throughout Japan. In 2010, nationwide full-scale service are planned to start. ITIF World Congress will be held in Tokyo in 2013. I'm sure you can see smart way in practical use. Smart way is underway to realize practical use. As a closing my presentation, I would like to show deployment of smart way service. And the initial phase to develop the infrastructure has been mainly by MLIT and other public agencies to start audio wide area road traffic information, focusing on highways and parking information to restoration. With this infrastructure development and spread of ITIF onboard units, we anticipate that private companies will develop and expand various services. By deploying smart way with expanding service, safety will be improved user, and road use will become more convenient in a very accessible way. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you. Rich.
Grace.
Great. Good morning. Again, I'm Riz Khalid. I'm part of IBM's public sector team, and I'm definitely not here to do IBM advertisement, although if you buy IBM, it's probably a good idea. So what I like to talk a little bit about is, instead of reading the slides to you, is kind of talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we've learned based on our engagements around the world. How important this whole area is as far as we're concerned. Our CEO has very much articulated the whole smart planet strategy that we have. And transportation is a key element of that strategy. And it's not single view as far as let's just integrate technology into this and see what happens. But it's very much a holistic view of some of the issues that have been raised by Rob and Steve in this report, but also kind of looking at the overall economic development and global competitiveness element. And I think a really key piece that we, although there's some statistics that have been thrown out that Americans waste about a week sitting in traffic every single day and so on and so forth, but a lot of the statistics that necessarily don't make it out to the front of are really what type of impact congestion has on business processes in general. When you think about supply chain management, when you think about having reliability for somebody like a UPS or DHL, to know exactly what the congestion is so they can optimize their fleets and so on and so forth. So I think one of the things we have to do in this country is we have to look at technology and we have to look at really transportation as an issue of a greater global, economic competitiveness rather than just livability solely or improving, getting people from point A to point B. So having said that, I'll put a couple of while we're waiting for that, we'll put up a couple of statistics, just to kind of put things in perspective. What's going on around the world, as we all know, is a substantial urbanization that's taking place. There's mega cities that are being developed all over the world. And what's also happening as a result of it is there's a lot of competition. So when you look at, it's interesting, all the examples that we gave today of leaders in transportation area have been in Asia. Right, and specifically, and when you look back just 15, 20 years ago, and just look at the telephony and communications area, we were the leaders in landline and so on and so forth. So as a result, what did Asia do? They completely leapfrogged us and have cell phone ubiquitous connectivity all over the world. Even today in this country, when you go from point A to point B on certain highways, you lose your phone calls, right? Which is unheard of in some of the Asian countries. I think we actually have a really unique opportunity here in the U.S. to kind of do the reverse leapfrog, right? We can take a lot of the lessons learned out of what's going on in Japan and Singapore and the like, and really apply them here, but we have to do it very strategically and look at it from a competitiveness point of view. And with that, when you look at some of the wastages out there today, you have billions of liters that are wasted, billions of trees as far as carbon emissions are concerned. So these are all that are essentially impacting our global competitiveness. And when you look at 20 million gallons saved in water, right? Just some of the examples that you see up here, just by improving processes, is essentially what we have to do when it comes down to using transportation systems. So let me kind of skip all this and get to what the really interesting slide is here. And I think it's this slide here, this maturity. I know it's an eyesore, so we're going to make this available, but this is an important slide because I think what it demonstrates is essentially where the U.S. is vis-a-vis a lot of the countries, and specifically where the U.S. could be if we were to have a national strategy. And so it's what we call the maturity model side. This is something that our business consulting team does with clients, where we actually sit down and look at where different cities and municipalities or countries are vis-a-vis their surrounding jurisdictions. So if you look at the dotted green line, that's an average city in the U.S. as far as transportation systems are concerned. And you have some cities that are doing really well when it comes down to planning and so on and so forth. But it's very fragmented. We don't have kind of a national view. But if you look at what's going on in Singapore and Japan, and even new cities that are developing around the world, like for example in the UAE, Masdar is a big city that's being developed. When we presented this to them, their whole view of this was, well, that's all great, but give me a solution that's going to put me to the right of this, right? So they're looking at transportation of how they can improve their supply chain, how they can essentially have a zero-emission society, but at the same time that would allow them to be globally competitive moving forward. And there's a huge methodology that's behind this, but this is going to be available on the website, and we can dig deeper into it. Okay. So a couple of examples that I want to talk about with this, with some of the ITIS deployments that have been carried out and some of the lessons learned. And I think some of the things that Steve hit on earlier, which is, the policy, national policy and national leadership is really a key piece to having an effective transportation strategy. That's, in our opinion, that's one key piece of it. The other key piece of it, I think, is really from the point of view of consumers. We have to make the consumer understand that transportation is an asset that they have to value. And I think you saw this here in the US just a couple of years ago when the gas hit $4 per gallon. You had Americans driving 6 billion miles less, right? Because they hit their pocketbook, they realized what the value of it is for going from point A to point B. And as soon as the gas prices go down, you know, the same issues go back up again. So what we have to do, I think, from a policy point of view and making people understand that they have to start looking at transportation as a key asset that they have a value and they can associate themselves. So they have an ownership into the transportation system. And I think when you look at Singapore, we look at Japan, because of their limited constraints as far as physical location is concerned, there is a sense of ownership of a transportation system. And as a result, they're willing to make some compromises, which we necessarily here in the U.S. may not be prepared to make, right? So I think one of the key pieces to this is that our policies, as we're thinking about deploying them, is to really help people understand what the value of the transportation systems is and what impact it has on them on a daily life. So going back to what Scott was saying, as far as the smart cities initiative that ITIS America is focused on, I think having a scalable deployment, so beyond just a couple of square miles, but actually having a deployment which allows people to see what the value and the benefit is. And I'll give you a quick example. In Stockholm, for example, we did a deployment, and it was a 6-month deployment and it was fully scalable, of congestion charging. So essentially charging people to come into downtown area between X and Y hours. And instead of government just saying, okay, we're going to do it in an XY center block area and we'll figure out later on if it's going to be a pilot or if it's going to be scalable, they decided to deploy it in the city for 6 months and really demonstrate what the value of the system is. And when the citizens actually saw that there's 20% less congestion, that they are incentivized to ride the public roadways and so on and so forth, 6 months later, the government actually did a referendum on the system itself. So people got to vote, and because of that, they were able to, they voted it up, so now it's a fully deployed system. So essentially, people saw the value of that system to them on their daily life, and they didn't mind paying the extra toll to go into the downtown area. So when you look at what happened in New York just a couple of years ago with Mayor Bloomberg, where it was all this, essentially everybody got into a dogfight about this is going to impact my jurisdiction and so on and so forth, more than the other guy's jurisdiction, because the congestion charging scheme that's being introduced, you had a lot of political angles to what was going on. I think what we have to do is at the national level raise the discussion above the local jurisdictions to actually have a policy which allows us to really deploy solutions and deploy systems which allow the American people to see the benefit. Because at the end of the day, we as consumers have to see what the value of something is in order for us to really realize it and support it. And I think Stockholm's a perfect example of that. If the government realized that the only way they'll get the system funded and approved would be to allow the people to see the benefit of it. And as a result of that, they generated over $120 million in incremental revenue, which they then earmark right back into improving the transportation systems and providing more train stations and so on and so forth, railroad cars and buses and the like. The other example I'd like to talk a little bit about is Singapore. There's really some interesting, technology that's being deployed there. So when Rod mentioned earlier, when he was, I think it was going to get a parkway or 495 and real-time traffic, providing you real-time traffic is just as good as no information in my mind. When you think about it, when you get on 66 and you get on when you get on the highway, and right when you get on, there's congestion for 3 miles, and then there's a sign that tells you, congestion, for the next 3 exits. Well, that doesn't really do you any good, right? So in Singapore, what they're doing is actually being able to predict out up to an hour where congestion is going to happen before it actually happens. And it takes into historical data, it takes into real-time data that's being generated, for example, from their public safety vehicles and the public bus systems that they have. So there are sensors that are on there, on these vehicles that are essentially looking at the speed. So how long does it take for a bus to get from point A to point B, and really putting that into an algorithm engine and determine, and then also looking at the humidity levels, looking at what the weather is today, what time of day it is. So it pulls together a lot of the different points of information and actually can predict out where congestion is going to be up to an hour. And I think about that for a second of what the value of that information is, right? The value from a consumer point of view is that I then know how to better plan my trip. I then know how to utilize the system a lot more efficiently. But the value to companies like DHS, the delivery companies, is that they can optimize their fleets a lot more efficiently. But that value is something that private industry, I would argue, is willing to pay for. So that's an opportunity for a new business model to be developed. So at the end of the day, I think, you know, when one of the speakers talked about we need to have kind of a national open type of, like, similar to the weather system type of a system for transportation is absolutely right on, because what it will do is it will open up new business models and it will allow for private industry to innovate and as a result improve the efficiencies of the transportation systems. So with that, I'll stop. I think I'll went over my time. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We have probably 15, 20 minutes for questions or comments. So if you want to raise your hand and identify yourself first. Go ahead.
Hi, David Pickrell, and I'm with ITIF International and also a feature author for Highways. And I want to add kind of a philosophical question. By the way, Stephen, fantastic article. I worked with you for a year, and I really think you did a great job. It really covered a lot of landscape. So anyway, we did identify myself. My question is, let's say the STA goes through, and we're now kind of in first day of the rest of your life for ITS. What would all of you, based on your knowledge of the U.S. market, think would be the kind of the flagship, get it right the first time project that should be rolled out? You know, congestion charging, tolling. What's the one we need to make the first big impact with?
All right, you guys hear me? I think, and I think we have to do this because of the webcast. So, I think one of the key projects we need to do right off the bat is really look at information management as far as being able to empower the consumers to have that information that they need so they in turn can make the right decisions. And what I mean by that is providing some type of a solution which would allow the end consumer to really get the value out of their transportation systems. And what I mean by that is not just road surface, but also multimodal, right? Being able to say, okay, there's congestion on this road, but if you get off the next highway, there's a parking spot there. You can go park there, and guess what? Instead of paying $30, you'll pay $5 to park in that parking spot. So I think essentially doing that type of a solution which allows the end consumer to see the value. Because I think if the end consumer sees the value, then in turn will improve the political process of putting a better strategy in place.
I guess I would say that I think that the first place you need to invest is in the Smart City initiative that I discussed before. That would enable USDOT to and OEMs to deploy IntelliDrive on scale, enable you to work on VMT on scale, enable you to do what RIS is doing on scale. Those are the things that are going to leapfrog. And in fact, that's one of the models that South Korea used as it built out its ITS system.
Great. Other back there.
Thanks. I'm Sabrina Howell from Securing America's Future Energy. So first of all, thanks for the great presentation. I was wondering whether any of you have addressed what I've seen as a major challenge to deploying ITS technology in America, especially like a VMT fee, which is privacy concerns about having a GPS-driven transponder in your vehicle. And I think the places where this has succeeded, like for trucks in Switzerland and Germany, and then obviously in the East Asian countries you've talked about, people are more accepting of having such a device in their vehicle. And you did mention the importance of cultural factors in ITS success. And so I was wondering if there's any kind of effort to make a succinct case to the American public that there is a way to do this while protecting privacy.
I want to jump into that because it's my pet peeve or pet passion as chair of the Finance Commission, because we were unanimously and strongly committed to shifting from the gas tax to a national VMT by 2020. And the reality is that 30, 40 million people have a GPS in their vehicle today. And no one worries about being tracked because they don't track you. It's a one-way signal that comes from the satellite to the device. So you know where you are. It or they or Big Brother doesn't know where you are. The Oregon pilot program was clear was clearly designed in a way that was totally 100% anonymous. And you can and should build a system like that. Now, so my point there is, privacy issue is a 100% perceptual issue. It's not a real issue. That doesn't mean it's not a real issue politically. And we've seen that in some of the hearings at the Senate in particular. So I think there's a real need to do education, to do pilot programs, frankly. And one of the other things we'll see is the Dutch are doing this in 2014, the Danes in 2016. We'll see other countries do this. We'll see that it works. We'll see that it's totally anonymous. And I think that'll help. But you're right, it's a perceptual issue that does have to be addressed. Yes, sir.
Microphone. Yeah. Okay. The Yuki member of the Washington. Doesn't work, does it?
I don't know if it works.
It's on. It works. It's on.
Yeah. The Yuki member of the Washington Strategy Group. The student picked up the orders of 3 Asian countries as case studies. And all of them, either island country or the tip of the peninsulas. And meanwhile, there is no reference to countries in Europe, which I think, which I assume that they have some problems as well, or some advanced technology over there. When I was in Geneva for some conference, I took a bus from Geneva to Chamonix for skiing. And the bus didn't stop at the border. And I just wonder whether there is a particular reason why you did not pick up any European countries, or there is characteristics of these island country or the countries at the tips of the peninsula.
Sure. And I think the report makes clear that there are a quotier of industrialized nations that are making significant progress in deploying intelligent transportation systems. But I think when you look at Europe, you can look at any number of countries that are making significant ITS deployments. The United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, certainly. I would say that what we wanted to do in this report is look at the preponderance of the evidence and ask for which countries are the citizens currently enjoying the benefits of operationally deployed intelligent transportation systems. And Europe's got a lot of wonderful stuff going on with the CVIS, Cooperative Vehicle Information Systems. Rob talked about Holland bringing on the VMT system in 2016 for passenger vehicles. Certainly, I think Europe is up there. There's probably a step ahead of the United States. I just thought when you looked at it on a national basis, certainly in Japan with systems like SmartWave, in Singapore with adaptive traffic signals throughout the entire country, but on a national level, these countries were the ones that had made the most progress. I think what you also see is maybe European countries are maybe 4 to 5 years behind. Now you have the Lisbon strategy, you have the EU 2010, so they're building these IT strategies now. Japan, Singapore, South Korea, these things going back 20 years. And I think what I really saw in the Asian countries is that at a national level, they sensed how ITS played in terms of national economic competitiveness, the competitiveness of these the auto sectors of their economy as a key industrial base. They saw how ITS tied into issues like environment, like safety, like catering to the needs of an aging population. And I just felt those countries were a couple steps ahead. But that's not to say Europe is not also making significant progress in deploying ITS, and I think just a step behind.
I'm done. I'll send Nick Much with the Elcan Corporation. I enjoyed the presentation, especially like Reese's comments about how ITS in transportation is tied to economic competitiveness and productivity, because I think we missed that grossly. I like the $200 billion number, which is still too low for the price of congestion, but we need to make a point. If you want to change ITS, it seems to me there are 2 ways to do it. One is sort of inside baseball, and you go out and you talk to the authorizing committees and say we have a good cost-benefit ratio, and that might work. If you want to do the image that Rob was talking about with we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, you need a simpler message, a more personal message, and I've yet to hear that. You think about the interstate highway system, the real message was no traffic lights coast to coast. People can understand that. For ITS, maybe it's some surprises, I don't know, but talking about saving lives and saving time and saving money is not enough. We don't have a personal message, but I have heard, maybe the gentleman would have some ideas.
Smart traffic lights coast to coast. Anyone want to comment on this? I mean, that's the problem with the overall transportation system now anyway. We keep navel-gazing to identify what's the federal role and how can you make the mission and all in simple one thing. We're talking about performance improvements that are making out of wide. Let me go here, then here, then here. Yes, sir. Here, and here.
Okay. Well, I got the mic.
You were intent to get the mic.
Richard Bishop, District Consulting. First of all, I want to echo what Deb said. I think the personal message is very, very important. Question relates to the report's focus on the importance of the federal role in moving ahead, which I think makes sense. And then you go down very specifically into this recommendation that the National Program Office be expanded to a deployment role. I'm just curious where that comes from, rather than allowing that to happen out of the traditional Federal Highway Office of Operations and the folks who have deployed ITS up until now. What's the rationale?
Or Scott can say that too.
The key point we wanted to make with that recommendation, the ITS JPO has just come out with a new 5-year strategic plan for ITS 2010 to 2014, which is, as I understand it, a research program. We'll do very valuable things of reaching the benefits of ITS, but fundamentally what the United States needs to do is to shift from a focus on research of ITS to a focus of how to deploy ITS in the United States. And as I understand, the statutory remit of the JPO is focused on research and does not extend to deployment. And we think it should be the JPO. I'm not. There could be other elements within that are assigned with that deployment role, but there needs to be a national focus on deployment of ITS in the United States. One other point I'd just briefly like to make: you look at Japan and the progress they've made with SmartWave, and they've deployed DSRC, dedicated short-range communication, since 1996. One thing that's soon to be quite clear in this report is that the United States does a lot of reinventing the wheel in terms of ITS, and it seemed to be we might be able to make a stronger push to more proactively look at some of the technologies other countries have already been down the road of deploying, and think about maybe how we can deploy some of those lessons more quickly in the United States.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, just so you know that there's a limit on what the JPO can do, and I think they're frustrated by it. I think they've been frustrated by it. I think we're all frustrated because I think a lot of the research, as Rob has said, a lot of the research is done. I mean, a lot of these technologies are here, and for me, the real question is how do you go to scale, and that's a deployment issue as much as it's a research issue. And so, if you're looking at how can the JPO be the most effective over the coming 5 years, it's really, I think to give them, to unshackle them a bit would be my opinion. And I think Federal Highways has got a significant role, but they're not bound nearly the same way. But I think if you look at how the research dollars are going to be spent and how the deployment dollars are spent, the Joint Program Office has got a very significant place to play there.
Gentlemen over here. I want to try to get 3 more questions for you.
I'm Wayne Bird, unaffiliated social scientist. I'm just wondering, I didn't hear much mention of mass transit. I'm wondering what kind of coordination does there need to be with deployment of ITS and mass transit? And the same question for traditional infrastructure, the asphalt and the bridges. Does that have to be worked into the plan, coordinated somehow?
Well, when you read the report, you'll see that there is mass transit in there. I mean, especially as you talk about the user information systems, broad-scale user information systems. For them to be really effective, they've got to be multimodal. They've got to provide information to the user about what's the situation on roads, what are your options for mass transit. And we're starting to see that here with the use of Google Transit, for example. You see it in the, so absolutely that's a critical part of it, and it's the only way that you can have a real-time information system that works, because we've got to have choices.
Yes, sir, great. Right here. And then back. Did you, you do it again?
I'm Albert Glassman. I have a question about some great statistics that come out of the benefits. I don't know where these came from. Can you go to DOT and or other sources as well that could support these kinds of advantages that you mentioned? And a related kind of question. The United States is obviously, as others have said, much larger community than that have had some success in making progress. The United States areas that maybe Midwest, more sparsely built mountains. I'm wondering, did Japan, as they institute their system, is it mainly along the East Coast where the major cities are? What did you do in the mountain areas in the central part of Japan or in the western part of Japan? What kind of expenses and systems putting in there? Thank you.
You've got the mic there.
So in Japan, at first, we started to install in 3 metropolitan areas, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya. And after that, I tried to expand the nationwide area.
I think one or two. We'll see the gentleman in the back.
Hi, yeah, Paul Brubaker from Cisco Systems. First of all, I've got a little bit of background in this area, and I'd like to commend you for this report. I think it's phenomenal. Just wish it would have happened a couple of years ago, but that's okay. Better late than never. The point I want to get you to elaborate on a little bit are the cultural obstacles to change. You mentioned nationwide system. You know, you got to get through sort of the 50 states, typical apparatus for deployment. And I would like to take just comment briefly on Mr. Bishop's issue here on why not Federal Highways Office of Operations, because then you'll get a modally stovepipe solution, which is what we've been arguing against. We want to go multimodal. We want a different paradigm for deployment. Again, which brings me back to the cultural issues, which I'd like to comment on, as well as some of the Hill and jurisdictional cultural issues that are going to play a role in this. Thanks.
I mean, I think your overall point's the right point, which is this is about culture. I mean, if you think about reauthorization overall, there's an awful lot of people this time on reauthorization who are saying, you know what, we got to do something different. And to me, this fits into the different bucket. And the real key to reauthorization, I think, is going to be, are we going to do something different, or are we just going to do the same and add it up, just plus it up just a little bit more? If we do that, 6 years from now, we'll be in pretty much well, no, actually, we won't be in the same boat. We'll be in a much worse boat. The evidence is very clear about that. So I think this is about innovation, doing something different, institutional innovation, technological innovation, and this, to me, is a key underlying part of that. So.
Pick up a couple points on that. First, to complete responding to your question, there are 182 footnotes in the report, so every stat is cited. I would refer you in particular to a book, Mobility First by Stan Staley and Shirley Ibarra. They have a whole chapter on ITS solutions.
Shirley's right here, by the way.
Actually.
It's actually Adrian Moore.
I'm sorry, it was Sam and Adrian.
But it surely helped.
It surely helped. Paul, back to your question. In the stimulus package, we put $20 billion for computerized health records in this country, $11 billion for the smart grid. The level of investments we're talking about to profoundly transform our transportation system on the order of $1.5 to $2 billion a year, I think would be money we're able to maximize the operational performance of our transportation system.
So, okay, one last question. I'm sorry, we're going to only have to one. This gentleman has his hand up first. Sorry.
Hi, Eric Puskar from NIST. So my question naturally concerns standards. Are all the standards in place right now, currently in the U.S., to allow for a nationwide deployment and rollout of ITS? Or is there's still more work to be done? Because I noticed from the presentation from Japan that in their planning cycle that the adoption of a standard was one of the first steps they had, and obviously that must have been instrumental in helping that roll out.
It's a great question, and the answer is no. USDOT is working, towards that goal, and they're working towards a regulatory decision around IntelliDrive, the vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure by 2013, and that's going to drive standards. I think in the interim, you're going to see more activity. The United States is committed to 5.9, that segment of the spectrum and you are starting to see standards being developed around that, but they're not all developed, and they need to be, and that's going to open up the markets as we move to an open and interoperable system where with standards.
Great. Well, I know there are probably some more questions, and I think hopefully our speakers will be here for a few minutes if you want to ask them. So please join me in thanking a great panel, and appreciate it.
Hi, I wanted to introduce myself, Robbie Penzi. Hi, Rob. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for very interested in
Oh, very good.
These chicken and egg scenarios, taking a flyer and building it and hoping the market will come. And our guys just don't do that. I mean, we take a much more cautious approach to making these huge investments. And I think that's the biggest cultural difference. But the idea of this back room, everyone sitting on tatami mats, smoking, making a big industrial policy, and pulling everyone in the room is quite frankly a myth.
If you say so. Let me just close by saying I think clearly the notion of public-private partnerships is more accepted in Japan. Certainly it's more accepted in Korea and Singapore and even the UK. So at least we would argue there is some role for government to facilitate here at minimum, certainly to be an early adopter where it makes sense for the government to do that. Let me just close by two things. One is this is a series, this is number 2 of a series of 5 reports we're doing looking at IT application leadership. The first report was issued in September where we looked at health IT, and there, surprise, surprise, we were way behind. We're behind the Scandinavian countries that are probably 4 to 5 times ahead of us in terms of health IT usage. And we'll be releasing a 3rd report in this series in January on intelligent transportation systems. Looking at what countries are leaders there, why this is important technology, what government can do it, and then a report after that on authentication and ID, interesting developments there, and then finally e-government. So with that, thank you for attending, and please join me in welcoming and thanking our guests.